Welcome to Rights and Remedies, the podcast where we explore the law, the fight for justice, and healing. I'm Allison Mahoney, your host and a lawyer dedicated to fighting for the rights of survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, as well as children harmed by the child welfare system. Each week, we delve into legal battles and court cases, share powerful stories that demand change, and spotlight the cutting-edge practices that are helping victims on their journey to healing. So, if you're ready to dive into the intersection of advocacy and healing, subscribe to Rights and Remedies today. New episodes are released weekly, and we can't wait to have you join the conversation. Together, we can make a difference. Welcome back to Rights and Remedies. Before we begin today's episode, please be advised that we'll be discussing child abuse and child neglect, which may be triggering for some listeners. If you need to take a break or simply skip this episode, please do so and prioritize your own well-being. And as our guest today, we have Jill Roth-Gutman. She's a lawyer, an advocate, and an author. Thank you so much for being here, Jill.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be a guest on your podcast today.
Thank you. We're excited to have you. So can you share a bit about what your firm does? Roth-Gutman Law, and you're based in New Jersey, right?
Yeah, so my firm is based in South Jersey. Actually, I'm located in Voorhees, which is in Camden County, right outside Philadelphia. But I only practice New Jersey law. And a lot of what I do is also online for people that live in other areas of the state. And I practice affordable basic estate planning. So I write wills, living wills, and power of attorney. And then the other portion of my practice, which is more than half of my practice, is actually more niche family law, which is a lot of focus around child welfare law. So, including being a guardian at Litem, which is an attorney in contested custody cases, or that particular type of guardian ad litem for me, that's what I do. And I also do foster child adoptions through Division of Child Protection and Permanency, which is formerly DIFUS. So anyone from New Jersey listening going, what's DCP&P? DIFUS is probably what you're used to them being called.
Okay.
And then I also provide DCP&P consultations, mostly for family members and foster parents, which are referred to as resource parents in New Jersey. And I do a little bit of uncontested guardianships for special needs families with young adults, so adults turning 18.
Incredible. Thank you. It sounds like you are very busy. In the adoption cases, who are you representing?
So I am representing the parents, and I file, or I should say the pre-adoptive parents. I'm filing adoptions on their behalf for children that are in the system that are already legally free and ready to be adopted.
Okay. So are you in family court for the most part? Is that where these cases happen in New Jersey? I know it's
Yeah.
different in every jurisdiction.
Yeah, so in New Jersey, it's family court. The adoptions are filed through the surrogate's office. So that's who I'm representing in that type of court capacity for, particularly for foster families. And then I also do consultations, but that is outside being in the courtroom. So it's more behind the
I
scenes,
see.
answering questions for families that have questions about navigating the system.
Okay. From working in, not in New Jersey, but in New York's foster care system as an attorney and seeing how other systems function, they're very complicated. And for families, I think it could be quite overwhelming. So it's incredible that people have a resource like you. When did you start your firm and what inspired you to start it?
Yeah, so I started my firm March of 2022, and really, it was kind of a whole host of reasons why I started my firm. My mom worked out of our home and had a lot of different types of people over at our house regularly. She was electrolysis. So,
She was a
um,
what?
yeah, it's a great question. She was electrolysis, so it's permanent hair removal before laser hair removal existed.
Ah, okay, okay.
Yeah. So I know most people are like, she does what? And I spent my entire life like explaining that. But our family room was actually her waiting room. And so we, at a very young age, my sister and I were talking to, all these different adults that were, coming into our house. And,
Mhm.
sometimes we'd sit there and do our homework, and other times we'd chit chat with them. And they really had all different stories, and there were all different types of people. So I learned about all different types of people at a young age. My dad worked
Mhm.
managing a floor of doing logistics for a family business.
Mhm.
And so he also was interacting with a lot of different types of people. And so I was used to having them as role models. And so one day in the back of my head, I was always like, maybe one day I'll also have my own business. But I was working at the law guardian office, which I loved doing. And I was working with foster children and representing them in court and advocating for them. And as I was in this role of advocacy, I used to go over to their homes and regularly visit with them.
Mhm.
And their caretakers, whether it was family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or traditional foster parents, would have questions for me. Naturally, questions are going to bubble up, and you're going to ask the person that comes over to the house, whether it's a caseworker or a law guardian. And I would have to say, I represent the child. I don't represent you as the adult. I know you want to ask me
Mhm.
questions and you want answers, but I can't give you
Mhm.
them. That would be unethical. You have to seek your own legal advice. And so this continued throughout the entire course of my career there. And I worked there for over 13 years. And so, this was happening on a pretty much almost weekly basis. And it was very difficult for people to find attorneys who could answer their question about these particular types of cases, child welfare cases, or
Right.
in the court system, they're called children in court cases in New Jersey. And so I wanted to be able to help, more people.
Mhm.
And what better way to help more people than to really answer questions behind the scenes as to the questions people have. So
Right. I
questions.
love
Yeah, all different types of questions bubble up for people all the time. So I started that, doing that, and then really missed working directly with children. And so that's why I do a lot of guardian ad litem work,
that.
because for that work, I meet with children still and family members and then write a report to the court based on their circumstances.
The guardian ad litem work is in custody cases, right?
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
strictly custody
Okay.
cases. Sometimes there's overlap though with child welfare cases because sometimes the court, the case in the DCPP case will be closed and then it'll then only be open in more of a traditional family court kind of custody case. And
Okay.
so at that time, sometimes I'm stepping in and giving recommendations for families in those situations as well.
I see. I see. Okay. And for listeners who aren't overly familiar with the foster care or child welfare system and those court cases and how that works, you're talking about a lot of people not having attorneys or resources to turn to get information about what's happening and what they should do. The players who do normally have attorneys are who in these cases?
So in DCP&P cases, and this differs throughout the country as to who is assigned attorneys, but in New Jersey, if there's open litigation and DCP&P is involved, the agency, DCP&P, has an attorney who represents the agency and the caseworker, and then the parents or guardians, whoever's brought into court and named as defendants in a case,
Mm.
will also be, if they choose to be, if they qualify um, financially for a public defender, they will be assigned a public defender. If they don't qualify financially, they have to seek their own representation. And then children in New Jersey are automatically also assigned an attorney, and that attorney is referred to as a law guardian.
Right. And yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that it's different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction because there are plenty of places where kids do not get any sort of legal representation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and they're not given representation, but New Jersey's got I think, an excellent model where the law guardians are assigned to advocate for the children as far as what they want, and it's true advocacy. And then DCP&P is advocating for best interest, and sometimes those are aligned, and sometimes sometimes they're not 100% aligned in what, people are advocating for, the attorneys are advocating for, but it gives the child a voice in court. But that's not the situation across the country, and it's not the situation in traditional family court matters that are separate from DCP&P.
Right. And in New York City, we had the same model where there was direct advocacy for, and I guess it's probably, I actually don't know. I'm assuming it's statewide, but in New York City, we definitely did direct advocacy for children in foster care. So as soon as they were able to state a position, they could be 3 years old and state a position. The attorneys advocated for what they wanted rather than substituting in their judgment and advocating for what they think is best, which is what happens in many places in the country. And I think the idea is that if all the players are doing their job and providing the court with the information that the court should have, then the judge can make an informed decision.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And not just informed decision, but really make a decision based on best interests,
Yeah.
taking, what everybody says into account and understanding where the child's coming from, or,
Yeah.
maybe they're more comfortable with certain people. Maybe there's, a relative or a family friend that nobody ever thought of that
Mhm.
the law guardian is able to, mention in court for, to be involved in the case. So I think there's a lot of important reasons for that role to exist.
Right. And you said that for 13 years you were a law guardian in foster care cases. As for people who don't know, for listeners who don't know, what did your days look like as an attorney in that type of role?
So that's a really interesting question, and I think it's one that actually bubbles up for a lot of people. And I've been asked it throughout the course of my career because people don't, they really, it's a very unique type of role and probably not what most people think of when they think of lawyers in general.
Yeah.
So I spend probably over 60% of my time actually in the courtroom advocating for clients. And then the other part of the time, about 50% of the other part of my time was divided between actually, being in the office, preparing for cases, administrative kind of work, and the other 50% of the time going and meeting with my clients personally. So, and that meant going to their homes, going to daycares, going to schools, going to after school programs, going to camps. I have probably been in like over 50 daycares and schools in New Jersey. I've been all over the state, mostly South Jersey. I was assigned to Gloucester County, so that's where the bulk of my cases were. And, most of my clients were living, but I have certainly gone all over the place. I have even traveled out of state to see clients. So client down in Maryland or
Yeah.
New York or Pennsylvania or, but I think it's really important to meet with the children one-on-one so that way they know who you are and they feel, hopefully they develop a trusting relationship to be able to talk about what they want in the, to the judge. And then other times I would bring the children in to court to meet directly with the judges when
Mhm.
they requested to come into court.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining all of that. I know when I was doing that work, I loved it. It is a very unique role for an attorney. Let's shift and talk about your practice right now and the consultations that you're doing for people who don't have attorneys, but who are involved in the child welfare system, like foster parents. What's happening? What, where they would even need to consult with an attorney? What kinds of questions do they have?
So I would say a lot of times people are contacting me for really, there's probably two main reasons, although it could really be absolutely anything, but I seem to have reoccurring issues come up with some of the clients. So the first would be trial prep or court hearing preparation. So clients are contacting me because they're being told they're coming to court and they're like, what does that look like? What should I say? What should I not say?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of questions am I going to be asked?
Mm-hmm.
Am I allowed to talk about, things like my opinion on the case? And what does it look like for the day, right? So
Mm.
will they be allowed to sit in at the full court hearing, which is what they always want to do, but no, they will not be able to sit in for the full court hearing unless everybody agrees, and the likelihood of that happening is pretty much non-existent. So, I mean, it very, very rare circumstances it can happen, but typically that's, maybe a family member who has some kind of joint custody situation or something like
Mm.
that, but very rare are people allowed to sit into the courtroom. So that's one of the major reasons. And then the other one is usually revolving around licensing kind of questions. So even if there's a family member, not just a traditional foster home that's trying to be licensed, or even if it is a traditional foster home who's already licensed, maybe there's an issue that's coming up with the actual house itself or background type of checks. Maybe there's evaluations that either one of the parties or DCP&P or the judge is asking for.
Mhm.
Uh, and people are, usually asking me like, are they allowed to ask for this? Should they ask for that? Do I have to tell them or disclose certain information? And that's really on a case by case kind of basis, my answer to that question.
And for those who aren't familiar with the foster care system and licensing, who does the licensing? Why are people's homes licensed? Why is it important?
Yeah, so again, I think this probably differs around the country as far as the setup in each state,
Mhm.
but for New Jersey, there's an Office of Licensing. And that's separate from the local office that family members and foster parents will be in touch with on a case by case basis when they're working with, children or working with a family. But within that local office, there's a resource unit and there will be resource workers, and that worker will help license the home and be in touch with the Office of Licensing. So there's two different contact points. And the importance of it is to make sure we're not removing children from their parents and putting them in unsafe places, really. Because if you're going to take a child away from their parents, you better be putting them somewhere safe, Otherwise, what is the point of removing them at all? They should just be remaining where they are. And so, there's a lot of different hurdles to overcome in order for a home to be licensed. So, uh, they look at absolutely everything. I mean, they will measure the rooms themselves in order to say how many children should really be in, you know, a home should be licensed for. So if somebody's like, I want my home license for, 4 kids, but there's not a lot of space, they're going to say
Right.
no. They look at medical records and they look at finances. And a big reason why they look at finances is because the money is supposed to be going directly towards the children. So the stipend that's
Ah,
provided monthly, it's not supposed to be for the support of the caregivers and to be part of it's not supposed to be a salary for them as caregivers. And that money should be going solely to the children. So, and within that stipend it includes things like clothing and shoes and
mhm,
activities and
mhm.
food and,
Right.
school, activities and things like that. So, they really want it to be a safe environment.
Okay. Okay. And so a lot of questions come up during that process as questions are asked of prospective foster parents, where they then turn to you and ask, how do I navigate this
Yeah, a lot of times it'll be
situation?
people that are already, so for people that are already foster parents, it'll be, let's say for some reason somebody calls a referral in on them,
Hmm.
and they're taking care of a child, and
On
then
the
they
foster
said
parent,
on the foster
like
parent,
a report of abuse or neglect,
right?
right? Yeah.
So let's say somebody calls in a referral, they'll say, all right, they want me to, go do some urine screens to prove that I'm not taking any substances, or they want me to get a psychological evaluation.
Uh-huh.
Like
Uh-huh.
who sees those results of that? And
Got
do
it.
I have to do this at all? And so some of the questions are revolving around that. And when it comes to the family members who are trying to be licensed, the questions are, do I have to let them do like all those things that I just listed? And, they have a choice. They can become, licensed foster parents, or they could file for custody. But if
Mm.
they file for custody, they're not going to receive a stipend or financial assistance to take care of the child. So it's all going to be on them. And there's pros and cons to both. And depends on the family, depends on the situation, what's best. Some homes will probably never be licensed because of the condition. And so in those situations, custody might be better because at least the child's with them. In other situations, being a licensed home brings a ton of support with that from the
Mhm.
campaign.
Right. Right. Yeah, that is a lot for someone to navigate and to understand the real impacts of whichever decision they make. So I could keep asking you more questions about this, but I do want to touch on your adoption work. Can you explain how a child who is in foster care gets to the point of being adopted? What is their journey to that result?
So in New Jersey, the journey is in order to be legally free for adoption, if the child isn't dropped off as a baby in safe haven care, and we're talking about children that are really in the system as foster children,
Mm.
there's three ways to become legally free to be adopted. The first is a termination of parental rights, and DCP&P has to meet the prongs, the rights have to be terminated. The second is a general surrender. So the parents would say anybody that DCP&P feels is appropriate and fit may adopt my child. And the third way, which is the way I prefer, is called an identified surrender, which is only these particular people may adopt my child. And the reason why I say I prefer that is because it gives the parents some comfort and say into who is going to be taking care of their child. And the child, most importantly, knows that that's the person who will be adopting them, or hopefully adopting them. And if for some reason that adoption doesn't go through, the parents' rights are then reinstated and they're given the opportunity to reunify still with their child. And if that's appropriate, they do. And if it's not appropriate, then there is hopefully another loving home that is best for that child to be in.
Yeah. I would imagine that there's probably a lot of mixed emotions during this process, especially if it's a situation where the parents' parental rights were terminated. Can you talk about from the perspective of, from what you're seeing, the children experience, what is the day of adoption like for them?
Well, it's interesting because I think by the time a child gets to an adoption, the case is usually pretty old. So, because the parents have an entire full year until they get to a permanency hearing about whether or not the goal should still remain reunification. And then, in practical terms, I would say it typically takes about a year until a termination hearing.
Another
So
year after that.
another year is ideally it's 6 months, but those hearings do not always take place within 6 months. And
Mhm.
I would say typical is closer to a year. So we're looking at least 2 years. And then there's all the background work that has to be done in order to reach the actual adoption. So a lot of times we're looking at a very long period of time, especially from the eyes of a child to get to and achieve what's called permanency. For the listeners, that's basically the term of art that people in the field use, like they're achieving permanency. This is going to be their forever home.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it doesn't mean that they're not maintaining relationships with the biological family. A lot of times they are. A lot of times it is the biological family that's actually adopting. It's just that might be the most appropriate situation for that particular family.
You mean like
Sometimes it's not.
a relative or something like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not, but that's a lot of times it is a kinship home, which meaning a family home. So on adoption day, I think there's a lot of sense of relief, honestly. A lot of times it's like relief. Sometimes the families will make up like cute shirts or they'll wear matching outfits. Sometimes they'll have a photographer there. Other times it's just everybody with their phones snapping pictures. The adoptions are confidential, they're closed hearings, so somebody from the public can't just like go sit in for the hearing. But sometimes they're over Zoom because that's what's easier. Sometimes they're in person. But I would say just a sense of relief. I've seen a lot of kids just like want to celebrate the day, do
Yeah.
something special. And, it's just it's a really special, unique moment for a
Mhm.
family. I think there's a little bittersweetness, because depending on the relationship they had with their biological parents, because if the child had, if they were close to their parent, it can be also, a little bittersweet. But I would say majority of the adoptions I have done, and I mean majority meaning probably like 95% of them have been more celebratory than anything. And even that other 5%, usually those kids still like a big sigh of relief
Yeah.
that they finally can move on with their lives and everybody's going to stop knocking on their door once a month to come visit them and say, "Hey, what do you want your future to be like? What are you interested or how are you feeling about different things?" And that gets old. They get really, really tired of being in the system. And so this marks a day where they can just truly move on and move forward with their lives. And I think that's really the best part of the day. But I love being part of that day because
Yeah.
I've done yeah, I've done adoptions as a law guardian and now I do them in private. And I just do the foster child and adult adoptions now. But the foster child adoptions is just like a piece of my heart. And the kids are awesome. Like the last one I did, I walked in, it's like I'd only met the child, once before for like 2 minutes. They gave me a big hug and a high five. They showed me their dancing shoes they had on. It's just a fun day. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really nice.
I can see how much you love that work just by how much you're lighting up talking about it.
Yeah.
So I want to be mindful of time, but I also wanted to ask you about the book that you wrote,
Oh, thank you.
which that is such an accomplishment to write and publish a book. What is it? What's it about?
Thank you for asking. So, my partner and I wrote a book. His name is Scott Gutman. He's a certified financial planner. And between being a financial advisor and myself doing family law and estate planning, we actually started this book called well, we wrote this book called Simplify Your Life. And the purpose was basically started off for ourselves, actually, personally. So he was leaving on a work trip, and I was just drowning in work. And all of a sudden, I looked at him as about to walk out the door, and I was like, if something happens to you, what am I going to do? I don't know where like certain things are right now because I was so focused on work at the time. And at the time, I was working a lot. My caseload was really high. And so we started putting together information for ourselves that started as a journal for ourselves, basically. And then we turned it into a book for other people and our clients and the public because we just think it's really important. So it's a journal that has all your medical information and history,
Ah.
financial and loan history, location of important documents like the wills or power of attorney,
Mhm, mhm.
passport, adoption records, marriage certificate. Basically, everything important you can think of in your life, putting in one place that's a tangible place. And I think it's I really like that we have it in book form. People often ask me about electronic, but we have it in book form because if something really is an emergency and you can't figure out the password to get into somebody's computer or their phone, that's not going to help them. So maybe in the future we'll figure out some way to do electronic, but right now we're very happy with the book. You take it off your shelf from wherever you've told everybody you've got it and there's all the information you need for an emergency. So we're
And
very proud of it and excited. And it's available on Lulu, actually.
that's what I was going to ask. So it's
Yeah.
available on Lulu, and what's the name of it again?
So it's Simplify Your Life, and the website is
Okay.
yourlifesjournal.com.
Thank you. If someone is trying to navigate the foster care system or needs help with an adoption, or there's a custody dispute in New Jersey where a child needs an attorney, where can people find you and where can people find information about your law firm?
So my website is rothgutmanlaw.com. It's ROTHGUTMANLAW.com. And my phone number is 856-244-8289. And I also have Facebook and Instagram pages if somebody wants to check me out on there too.
And we'll put all of that information. We'll put the website link and the link to the book in the show notes for people. Jill, thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of your insights and your background and what you've been doing. This is really, really important information. So we appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Allison. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for, tuning in to listen to what I have to say today. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Rights and Remedies. I hope today's episode gave you valuable insights into the legal issues facing victims and the pathways to healing. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Whether you're a survivor, an advocate, or someone looking to learn more, we're here to support and empower you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. You can also follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at ALM Law LLC for updates, resources, and more. Until next time, take care and remember that together we can make a difference.